Nolan Ryan always gets the big headline. On July 11th, 1985, he becomes the first pitcher in Major League history to reach 4,000 strikeouts. He gets there by blowing three past Danny Heap in the sixth inning, and by itself, it's enough to carry a night into baseball history. But sometimes baseball's rude. It lets one man make history, then asks somebody else to finish the game. And somebody else tonight is Bill Doran. Bill Doran went 5 for 6, scoring twice. He drove in 2. He'd already singled in Dickie Thorne in the 5th. 3 innings after Ryan's milestone night had officially stopped belonging to Ryan. Doran came up in the 12th and singled home Thorne again to win it, 4-3. And that's the thing I like about this game. It's not just a monument game. It's still a baseball game, a close one, a strange one, a 12-inning game, and the kind where history happens in the middle, and then the rest of the roster still has to go back to work. Welcome back to Astro 100. I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. This is Astro 35, and the focus is Bill Doran. July 11th, 1985, from the Astrodome in Houston. The Mets came in at 47-36, second in the National League East. The Astros came in at 43-42, fourth in the National League West. And the final score was Astros 4, Mets 3 in 12 innings. Ryan got number 4,000, and Bill Doran got 5 hits, including the walk-off. Dickie Thorne scored the winning run. Gary Carter tied the game. Sid Fernandez was pretty good, and Nolan Ryan was Nolan Ryan. It's one of those nights where the cast list makes you feel like baseball is being very generous with its inventory. So if you're Bill Doran, this is a useful kind of game to claim. Not because it's the most famous game he ever played in. Probably isn't. But because it shows you exactly what he was. He wasn't the loudest Astro, and he wasn't the most famous Astro. He wasn't even the reason that most people remember this date. But he was right there in the middle of it, all night long, doing second baseman things until the game had no choice but to end with him. The Mets walked into Houston hot, on a 9-game winning streak, and starting to look like the version of the mid-'80s Mets that everybody remembers. Loud lineup, young pitching, swagger, enough talent to make the whole National League nervous. They lose this one and then finish the season 98-64. Somehow they still missed the postseason because back then, second place could go be excellent somewhere else. Houston was a different kind of mood entirely. The Astros were just over 500 and still trying to decide whether they're really in this race or just orbiting it. Bob Lillis had kept them respectable, but respectable and dangerous, not always the same thing. The 1985 Astros were still trying to become one thing instead of 3 different partial things. They ended up 83-79, which is good enough to avoid embarrassment, but not good enough to matter in October. So the room temperatures are different. New York comes in like a contender. Houston comes in needing some proof. And that makes this a good baseball game right away. In a larger sense, baseball was careening towards the All-Star break with a bunch of real races still alive. The 1985 All-Star game was just 5 days away in Minnesota. The division pictures weren't yet settled. St. Louis is ahead of the Mets in the East. The NL West is still crowded enough to feel alive. Dave Parker wins the first home run derby on July 15th. John Tudor was in the middle of one of the nastiest pitching seasons of the decade. Dwight Gooden's building the season that would end with the Cy Young Award. And just a week earlier, Keith Hernandez had hit for the cycle in a 19-inning July 4th game against Atlanta. It's the game that most people still remember because Rick Camp somehow hit a home run in it, like baseball had lost its mind. So this wasn't a dead little Thursday game in the corner. This is Major League Baseball moving towards the break with a lot of noise already in the room. On this particular night, Houston got to supply a lot of it. And the obvious subplot is Ryan's 4,000th strikeout. It's so obvious it threatens to swallow the whole game, and that's why I'm trying not to let it. The better subplot for an Astro 100 episode is this. What does Bill Doran do on a night that belongs to Nolan Ryan? He keeps showing up. He singles in the 5th. He keeps the line moving. He scores. Comes back in the 12th after the whole game is dragged past regulation baseball into extra innings baseball and ends it himself. Seen from a year later, this game looks a little like a trailer for the 1986 NLCS. with some of the same faces already in place. That's not what it meant that night exactly, but it's hard not to feel it now. The managers were Davey Johnson for the Mets and Bob Lillis for the Astros. Johnson's a former big league second baseman with a sharp baseball mind and an unusual comfort with numbers for the time. Lillis was more old school baseball lifer, former infielder, longtime coach, and a manager trying to hold a good but not complete club together. Johnson's 1985 Mets feel like a team on the rise. Lillis's Astros feel like a team searching for a cleaner version of themselves. So the pitching matchup was pretty good before it became historic. For Houston, it was Nolan Ryan, 38 years old, still throwing gas, still collecting strikeouts in bunches, still doing things no one had ever done before. The Hall of Fame summary on him is rude. 27 season, 5,714 strikeouts, 7 no-hitters, and a career long enough to make entire generations look temporary. On this night, he became the first man to 4,000. For New York, it was Sid Fernandez, just 22 years old, left-handed, strangely hard to hit, Hawaiian, and already building the reputation that would make El Cid one of the most quietly beloved pitchers of the Mets' run. He wasn't the fully formed version yet, but his shape was there. As for Hall of Famers actually in the game, there's not that many, but the ones who are here matter. Nolan Ryan and Gary Carter, for sure. Keith Hernandez is one of the best first basemen who ever lived, even if Cooperstown never quite opened the door for him. Darryl Strawberry is one of baseball's great could-have-been even bigger stars, and Rusty Staub, who pitch hit for New York in the 10th, also gives you a nice bridge back to Houston, because he was once one of the original stars of Astros baseball. That's a fun little connective wire in a game between these expansion twins, 24 years after they're born. Bill Doran's a switch-hitting second baseman from Cincinnati, drafted by the Astros in the 6th round in 1979 out of Miami, Ohio. He got to Houston in September of 1982 and stayed long enough to become one of the quiet central pieces of 1980s Astros baseball. He was the team most valuable player in 1985 and 1987, and when Houston put him into the Astros Hall of Fame in 2023, the club noted that during the 1980s, he led all Astros players in runs, stolen bases, and walks. Because Doran's game wasn't built for mythology, it was built for accumulation. Get on base, play a clean second base, turn double plays, score some runs, steal a few bags, switch hit, show up tomorrow and do it again. By 1985, he's in the middle of one of his best seasons, a .287 hitter with a strong OBP, good defensive value, and a kind of all-around game that tends to get appreciated fully only after the player's done. He wasn't a home run poster boy. He's the kind of player that good teams always seem to have, and bad teams always seem to miss once he leaves. And that's what this game meant to him. It let him wear his whole skill set in public. 5 hits, 2 RBI, and the last swing of the night. The Mets struck first in the second. Gary Carter got things moving. Danny Heap helped set the table, and Howard Johnson doubled to score Carter and put New York ahead 1-0. That's notable for 2 reasons. First, it meant this wasn't just a Ryan showcase from the jump. And second, it meant that Sid Fernandez got to work with the lead. That's a pretty good way to spend a Thursday night if you're 1985 New York Met. And Houston didn't answer right away. In fact, there's a ugly little moment in the third where Jose Cruz kills a rally by flying into an unassisted double play at first base. It was one of the top leverage swings in the game, and not in a good way if you're wearing orange. The Astros weren't humming along. They're still trying to find the tone. Then the game started to turn. In the bottom of the 4th, Phil Garner singled and Glenn Davis brought him in with a single of his own. Tie game 1-1. That wasn't the loudest moment of the night, but it mattered because it told Houston this is not just going to be Ryan gets to 4,000 strikeouts and we waste it. In the 5th, Dickie Thon gets aboard. Nolan Ryan does a very unglamorous pitcher thing and helps a little with a bunt, and Bill Doran singles him home for a 2-1 Astros lead. That's one of the things I like about Doran games. They're fun little pieces of baseball that still count exactly the same. Then comes the 6th. Ryan gets Danny Heap on 3 pitches for number 4,000. The crowd gives him a long ovation. The Astros knew exactly what kind of night they were standing inside. Ryan already frozen Darryl Strawberry and Gary Carter with career numbers 39.98 and 39.99 in the fifth. Now the big round numbers on the board. He finishes with 11 strikeouts in 7 innings. Houston immediately padded the lead in the bottom half. Kevin Bass homered to make it 3-1. Now you can feel the game shifting from milestone towards milestone plus a win. Of course, that's when baseball decides to get irritating. In the 7th, New York starts to push back. Lenny Dykstra gets aboard, and the inning starts to get messy. Keith Inning helps to create some traffic, and Gary Carter shoots a 2-run single that ties the game at 3-3. Ryan leaves with only 1 earned run on his line, but the scoreboard doesn't care about the bookkeeping. Tie game again. Nobody scores in the 8th. Nobody scores in the 9th. Now it becomes extra inning baseball, which is its own species. Remember, there's no ghost runner in 1985. Both New York and Houston had chances, but didn't cash them. Rusty Stahl pinch hit in the 10th. Jesse Orozco worked. Dave Smith kept pitching for Houston and kept getting outs. In the 12th, one of the biggest swings in the whole game came when Darryl Strawberry hit into a double play, and New York wasted a real chance to do some damage. That kept the tie alive. Sometimes keeping the tie alive is the whole hinge. It certainly was here. So in the bottom of the 12th, Dickie Thon singles. Dave Smith bunts him over to second. Bill Doran comes up against reliever Tom Gorman. Single, game over. Thon comes around to score. Astros win 4-3. That was Doran's 5th hit of the night, the second time he had driven home Thon, in the cleanest possible ending for a player like him. Not dramatic in a cartoon sense, just correct. The right man in the right place, doing the right baseball thing at the right time. For Houston, this game meant 2 things at once. It was a needed win against a good team. The Astros were still trying to prove they belong in the race at all. And it was a stage. Nolan Ryan got the milestone, Bill Doran got the ending. That's a pretty healthy use of one baseball game. For the Mets, it's the sort of loss that good teams have to absorb without panicking. They'd arrived in town on a 9-game win streak, and they're still excellent. They still look like one of the best clubs in the National League. But it did cost them one of those little July nights that seems ordinary until October arrives, and you realize every good team spent half of the year stepping on rakes and calling it character building. The papers the next day led with Ryan, of course. They had to. Ivy McLemore's Houston Post-piece was literally titled, "Ryan strikes out 11, sales past 4,000. That's the headline. That's the center of gravity. The UPI framing the next day said, Bill Doran may have delivered the winning hit, but he wanted no part of the credit. That sounds about right. On a night like this, the game-winning single is real, but it still has to share the room with history. And that's another reason I like this game for Doran. He got the hit, and even then, the night still belonged mostly to somebody else. It's a very Bill Doran way to be excellent. The Mets keep going. They finished 98-64, won 51 games at home, and 47 on the road. Still finished second in the East, 3 games behind the Cardinals. That's one of the great old format baseball frustrations, being that good and getting nothing but a better memory of July. Houston finished 83-79, tied with San Diego in the standings, and 12 games behind LA. Respectable, frustrating, and not enough. Bob Lillis gets replaced after the season, and Hal Lanier takes over, guiding the 1986 Astros to the National League West title. 1985 was one of those transition seasons where the Astros looked like a team with the right ingredients, but not the right recipe. After the events of this game, Doran remains Bill Doran. That's part of the point. In 1986, he is the Astros' leadoff second baseman on a division winner. In the 1986 NLCS against these same Mets, he homered in Game 3 to help Houston jump out early before that series turned into one of the crueler things that baseball ever did to a city. Later, Doran goes back to his hometown Reds and finishes up with the Brewers. He retires with a career that's better than many people remember on first pass. When the Astros put them into their Hall of Fame in 2023, Dusty Baker said Bill Doran was one of the most underrated players in baseball. That's exactly how this whole episode reads to me. Not invisible, not obscure, just underrated. A man who could do just about everything that a good club needed. Next time we leave the Astrodome and head back to the hardwood for Warrior 11, Tom Meschery. April 5th, 1962. And that one's got a different feel. Different sport, different tempo, and a different kind of history. Tonight was a baseball game where the biggest name in the building still needed a second baseman to finish the job. Next time, we get one of those early Warrior stories where the old NBA still feels half settled and half invented, which is usually when it gets interesting. This was Astro 3-5, Bill Doran, July 11th, 1985. Nolan Ryan got his 4,000th, and Bill Doran got 5 hits. The Astros got 12 innings, and baseball, as usual, got to keep both the headline and the ending. That's enough reason for it to be here. Thank you for watching.